We're here to solve this SSS puzzle. It is a combination of path puzzles and with the snake is some shape placement and even some cave-like logic with the seeing clues. There's a lot going on here. It's even maybe a little complex for the puzzle styles we prefer to be posting, but I think you'll find it's got a lot of interesting deductions that both the Tetromino Wednesday puzzle and the Saturday puzzle had some really great aspects to the solve. Early on, the thing that you should mostly be doing is recognizing that every cell has to be part of one of the three kinds of groups. We used color in the instructions, and I think that was also meant to encourage you to see how things are going. Because it has to be part of some kind of thing, a single cell in this corner is not yet a pentomino shape, so it has to extend somehow. It's not yet necessarily, although it could connect up to be a sunglass, something else, not yet signing, but we'll see that shapes tend to just grow and have to grow as we shade them in. For instance, these cells will be part of the snake because they're white circles, but as we actually start to mark shading, we get a lot more snake just naturally around. And we also get a cell here which is not a snake cell. And this not a snake cell, potentially a sunglass shape, but we'll see it really has to be a pentomino shape. So let's do some focus in this lower left corner, and that will percolate out to the grid. One of the first steps to see is that because you actually see two cells right now, these sunglasses have to come up. This snake will immediately go up. To complete the three, we take one more cell. This could be part of a sunglass. If it took this cell, it would almost have to be. It's no longer a pentomino, but then it would have to be part of this sunglass. There's nothing else nearby. That's really impossible, or it looks to be quite impossible. This is far more likely, and we don't know the full way they connect, but this kind of shape is what's going to happen. That now gives us conclusively that we were looking at a W pentomino in this corner. This 3 sees two cells, so to see another, it's going to do this. This has to be at least a U pentomino. You can ask yourself, is it part of a sunglass? Again, they are very far away, and also the snake is going to come here, and so there's no way to actually escape out. So this is immediately a U. And we know that these are marked. I'll shade these. Around all the snakes, cells like this, which bred 3 shaded cells, are problematic, so we get a few instances where we can get a lot of the shape of the snake pretty quickly. This has to be part of something. We said that before. It's not part of the sunglass. So it's got to keep extending. As we pass by, we'll look at the number clues and be using them. This is now a completed shape. This now looks very much like a pentomino. It can be an L or a Z. Whichever it is, it won't take that cell. At least that's pretty important to see. If I continue looking at the snake here, it's got to dodge this cell. And we can now get to where we even have a situation with this snake cell. Is it the case that it can come up and to the right? If it did, the snake is going to loop onto itself, so it's got to come this way. Note that we're now looking to be forming a path that's going to connect to one of these snakes. This is not a snake cell, and so we're going to just mark it that way. I don't know if it's a pentomino yet. I know it's not a snake cell because it touches here. And that actually forces the snake to do this. And you'll see that that forces this whole shape. And again, we've now hit a number clue, so I'm just marking what I know about that into the grid. This thing that is not a snake has to come like so. And there are a few things we can do. But the first thing, which is actually part of one of the more critical stall points in the puzzle, is to start to map this whole little piece. It's not a pentomino. The W is already in the grid, and that's the only pentomino shape left to it. It has to be part of a sunglass. You can ask which sunglass is it a part of, so let's actually start to think about all these sunglasses on the right side, which the puzzle starts with. And recognize that if it's part of this one, that sunglass is reaching over to here and it's colliding with these regardless of what it does. So the mapping is to this one. I'll just mark it S, and this is also a big S. And this is 7 and 2 over, so this is 7 and 2 over. And then it's going, it's continuing out, and then in and then out along this kind of path. So actually, that's what happened. I didn't count enough. These four, this can't continue one more cell because it's going to hit that space. So the shape we're seeing takes these. And the next sort of thing to think a little bit about to get this mapping to work is to see, can this sunglass come this way below the 7, or does it have to come above the 7? Coming above the 7, it has to take this narrow channel. It's unlikely to get around this whole sunglass above. And if it comes below, it actually is the case. It looks like it can only come as low as this because of the snake coming out, which leaves 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This has to close back up. Not enough space for the 7. So the most likely space for this sunglass to take is over this way. I won't immediately draw it in because we do want to sort of figure out that the sunglass above doesn't allow it to wrap over. But the way to get at that is to do one other large constraint in the puzzle. We've been looking at this large constraint, which is going to lock off some of this section. The second is to look at the global shape of the snake. And there's not much actually left for it to be able to do. It starts here. It has to continue in this corner, up and around. And it can't cut back into the grid here. It has to cut back into the grid on this rightmost column. The only escape for it from the top is through this very narrow path. Like so. And we've conceptually drawn that the sunglass will look like this, which means that even the snake down here is coming back into this space in this way, and specifically it's going to be taking these cells and not getting near this end. This end is going to be coming up. Get this 6 to go. Looks like this. We can't cut off the snake fully, so the 4 has to come over at least 1, but again, the snake will sort of do this. And that actually puts a lot of important constraints into the grid that we can be using right away. For instance, we can be shading a lot of this out. This is too far from anything to be a sunglass, so this is a pentomino. It actually tells us this is an L and not a Z. So we have both these identified. That shape for certain. This we now know for sure will be part of a pentomino. We haven't done anything up here, so let's take a quick look. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Have to take at least these 3. Can the snake come in this way? Well, it's possible, but I think we're going to quickly see, if you're looking in this corner, it's not super credible. This cell is not going to be able to be part of a sunglass or anything, so it must be part of this 4. That now forces the cell below it to be shaded as part of a sunglass. Forces this. we do have to deal with this too. Looks something like so. If this is part of the snake this way, the snake is going to hit in the sunglass, so the snake has to take this cell, and that wraps it now around the grid. This will possibly be part of a sunglass, but gotta start out from here. There are some cells that are not usable, like coming to this space is not going to be possible. So this has to be part of what we'll see as the start of this kind of shape. That takes up this, which takes up this more cell. That finally fixes those pieces. We want to mark some of these edges as filled. Again, we have this sunglass, it's going to come this way, and we can actually mark this in now. At least these cells we can mark in now. It marks these off. The cell's unusable. These are unusable. We need to take some cell over here, or we're going to have too many in the chute. That's really this one. This 2 isn't going to take all those whites, so take one more down. That looks pretty good. You can ask yourself if this is part of this sunglass below or this growing shape above. What we should recognize is that the 2 is going to cut off either all 3 of these cells, or at least this cell, but it's going to extend and be part of a pentomino shape by necessity. Note that even if this cell is used, this cell can't be the last shaded. It would form another W, so this being part of the growing pentomino is also important. This is a different pentomino, and this being a different pentomino actually says this cell cannot be shaded. We need to leave enough space to put in a full pentomino, and the only way to form one then, down here, it also leaves room for one up here to have an N and a Y. And that now marks off a little more about this sunglass. Now get the shape we're drawing in. Big snake over here. And the same down here, all just following the numbers. You now see that those cells are likely forced. So we're getting close to the end, and the most critical thing for this solve is to see that we have 6 pentominoes left to place, and in pentomino puzzles I like to sometimes sketch the maximum number of things I could put in. So I see enough room for 2 here, see room for 1 up here. I think there's room for roughly 2 here with a snake end, and the snake could come tight around, but seems like it really needs to be here, and that forces to get to 6, a pentomino in this corner. That can only be a P. So we've got this marked in the grid. This being a pentomino has to be the T. Mark that in the grid. The constraint we were thinking about to like have a snake exist and have pentominoes, recognizing the pentominoes that are left are all going to need a 3x3 bounding box. We really have to come around like this, and even within the 3x3 bounding box, the X is the only, I guess possibly an F, but this shape is really what looks forced. Critically, for there to be a second pentomino up here, gotta come down. That does conclusively force the X in the center. One of the most fun discoveries in the puzzle. This is going to be a V. What's left is an I and an F. This is the part of the F here, and the I can be somewhere in this column. It can't come further down than so, and for the 7 to have enough space, these cells get used. This is the only time in the puzzle we really have to have two pentominoes not touched diagonally, but it is a rule for the puzzle, so that's how we force the I down there. The snake has to come this way, and the snake has to come this way. And that should finish it. I will just mentally check the thing that you'll miss in a competition as you've drawn all the snake cells, and I have all of them marked in. So we made our way through the puzzle. I think the critical things which you recognize during the solve, we're always trying to map any shaded kind of cell to one of two things, a pentomino, a sunglass, or in the case of the very long path, a snake. We'd identify some places where we had like a not snake cell here, we knew it was a pentomino, a not snake cell, we didn't know what this was. But the first and very important constraint we ran into was seeing that there was a sunglass that reached all the way over to here. That now really isolates a pocket of the grid and an external part of the grid for the whole snake to be traveling through. And using that global constraint of how the snake gets through the grid, we started to isolate these other parts and got to an answer. So while it is a challenging Saturday puzzle and was a challenging week overall, we hope you learned something from this talk through, and we'll see you again soon.